Thank you for taking the time to sit down with me today.
My pleasure. Thanks for coming out.
I want to talk about who you're looking to replace Senator Kyrsten Sinema. Don't have a Republican in the Senate right now. I mean, this is a person who is working on both sides of the aisle, whether you like it or not. How are you going to go in there and kind of take over for her and be that replacement?
I think this is the beauty of having been a sheriff for 8 years. I represent Republicans, Democrats, and independents here in our county, and we've done so very effectively. And I think of all the candidates, I am the ideal replacement to deal with the issues that not only are affecting America, but they're affecting Arizona, which are border, economy, crime, national security. You're not going to find a candidate that's probably more experienced in all those things. And also, you're not going to find a candidate that understands how to represent all of their people, much like Kyrsten Sinema has done for the last 6 years as a senator. So I think I make a great replacement, and I'm looking forward to hopefully getting one of these seats back for the Republicans.
You're a leader right now, but going in and becoming a leader in Congress, that's obviously going to be new territory for you. What's your plan to make sure that you come in and you represent Arizona, not be a bench warmer?
Well, I wasn't elected by the people in Washington, D.C. I'll have been elected by the people in Arizona, just like I was elected by them here as the sheriff. And so my mentality is to represent the people of Arizona to the best of my ability. And doing that, I represent them by preserving and protecting their rights, and fighting for God, family, freedom, and the Constitution. And I think I know that Arizona needs a proven conservative leader and fighter. And so no doubt we're going to be able to hit the ground running and make an impact just like we've done here in Arizona.
Should you get to DC, we know that compromise is part of the deal there. What, if you go there, are kind of the 3 top priorities you would have?
Well, the border, no doubt, is the top issue. I mean, national security and border security, those two are lumped together. What we're seeing right now as far as national security threats to this country is happening at the southern border, to include the fentanyl poisonings of our family and loved ones here in America. So the border's got to be done. The economy's got to get back on track. We do that by getting our energy independence back, because it takes energy to make a product, ship a product, sell a product, and that's going to increase the cost, or it's going to be passed on to us in the way of inflation. And we've got to get the rule of law back under control. We need equal justice, justice for all. That is, I think Americans are very uneasy with what's going on in America, with how the law is being applied, especially from a federal level. So I look forward to getting in there, digging into that, the corruption that exists at those federal agencies, especially taking a look at those law enforcement agencies on a federal level.
Could you talk a little bit more about that? What specifically do you feel like is an issue on the federal level when it comes to the corruption?
Well, I think our FBI is misguided. I think they've lost their way. We have great FBI agents. I love our relationship with our FBI office here in Arizona. But I think what we've done is we've put people in charge in DC that don't understand the job. We don't, it used to be you would take an FBI agent and you would make him the director of the FBI. Now we're just taking political people, lawyers, putting them in charge of government organizations. And now Washington, D.C. is being run by technocrats and bureaucrats. When I watch the Senate interview these directors of the FBI or the ATF, the fact that they will not give answers like they should, because those folks at D.C. represent us, and they're asking for questions that we want to know, and these directors, these people, these technocrats and bureaucrats are not responding to it. And I think that they need to do a better job of responding to the American people. We need to hold them accountable.
Are you talking directly about, or kind of indirectly about, the charges and some of the accusations we've seen against President Trump?
Yeah, certainly that plays a part. I know a lot of Americans are very uncomfortable with what they're seeing right now. How you charge President Trump with all these things, and some of these charges are pretty far out there. It's a stretch. They're not charges you would normally charge people with. You've got the documents in President Trump's residence. Why are we not charging President Biden for the same thing? He had documents in his house. Everybody knows that. That's the unequal justice that Americans are uncomfortable with. And to see what they're doing to President Trump, that could easily happen to one of us. We're seeing it happening to parents going to school board meetings. We're seeing it happening to people that showed up that were in Washington, whether they went in the Capitol or not. Obviously, if you broke the law, you should be held accountable. But they're going after people that were just merely in the vicinity, not even in the building. That's the unequal justice that Americans want to do away with. We got to get back to where the law applies to everybody. And that's the strength that I bring to the table. We have done that. As a sheriff, I've done that for 8 years and nearly 2 decades as a law enforcement official. The law is blind. Justice is blind. It's supposed to be an equally weighted scale. We need to get back to that.
Where is that line, though? Because I know we hear a lot of Americans who say that they don't believe that the justice system in the country is fair. But I mean, I would assume you would say that your justice system within your county is fair.
I'd like to think so. I mean, I like to think we apply the law fairly. When we had executive orders and we had emergency orders that were being applied during COVID, those are not laws. Those were not appropriately passed through any legislative branch. So clearly we stood against those. We thought they violated the rights of the people here in our county. But as it relates to the laws, wherever those laws are being broken, we're holding people accountable for it.
I want to talk about the border. I know it's something you mentioned. It's on the minds of a lot of people. I want to pull a quote from your website. It says, "It is a false choice that we cannot simultaneously be a nation of laws and a generous, welcoming nation." That's not an approach I often hear when we talk about the border issue. Where did that come from for you, that mentality?
Well, what we see is the brokenness of the border. A lot of people think we're just out there picking people up, stopping people from coming in this country illegally. We see the humanity side of it. We see the people that have paid a ton of money to the cartels, and they've been hiking for sometimes weeks, certainly for days within our desert. They've traversed some very dangerous things, to include the cartels. And then all of a sudden you now are holding those folks accountable, as we should, because they broke the law if they came into this country illegally. I get the human side of it. And what I bring that up for is Congress and Senate have failed the American people. They have also failed these people who do want to come here and make a better life for themselves, because we have not made a process that is common sense. And so now we have people jumping to the front of the line, coming into this country illegally. We have our government incentivizing that by the way of the NGOs, the non-governmental organizations. These are all things that do not help the rule of law. They don't help us get control of the border. And in the meantime, it also, whoever's trying to follow the laws, it completely subverts what they're trying to do as well. So Congress and Senate need to do a better job of coming up with some good, common sense immigration laws that we can follow.
Do you think they need to be listening to people that are working the border, that are, from this border area more often when we have these conversations?
100%. Yeah, I always find it funny when state legislators or federal government will pass laws that they frankly don't know anything about. Because they came to the border one time, they think they know what the border is. You really need to sit down with the sheriffs, and not just the federal government branch of it, the sheriffs, the local law enforcement, to understand the impact. And when you have a potential solution, just how will that impact our communities? How will it impact local law enforcement, state law enforcement? So I would definitely love to see more interaction. And as a senator, I intend on doing that. I will make sure that I'm understanding with the men and women that are on the ground, what are the best approaches that we can do to fix the problems we're dealing with.
You've been down to the border many times. I mean, we talked about this before we were on camera, but I mean, the border is much of Arizona, not just that small section along our southern border. You've talked about how big of an issue this is. What was your reaction when we saw the bipartisan border deal fall apart a couple of months ago?
I love how they used the term bipartisan. First of all, it wasn't a border bill. Let's get that straight. It was a global assistance bill. There was far more money that was going to other countries than to our southern border. There was probably $20 billion that was going to the southern border. But not much of it, if any of it, was dedicated to fixing the problem or solving the problem. It was Band-Aids on the problem on the backside. It was DEI programs for the Border Patrol agents. It was more money for the NGOs within this country, and then there was another $9 billion going to federal or NGOs outside of this country that it would go through the State Department, ultimately likely to end up in the hands of the UN, who has admitted they've been giving money in the way of gift cards and cash to help people come into our country illegally. So there was a lot of problems with that border bill. We're not going to go through all of them today. It was not a good border bill. And if they wanted to run a border bill, it should be a standalone border bill. They already have one in place. It's H.R. 2. They should take that. It passed out of the House. It's sitting in the Senate because Chuck Schumer doesn't want to run that bill through the Senate. That is a much better bill that actually solves the problems, as opposed to putting a Band-Aid on the backside of the problem. That border bill, or they so-called border bill, which really was a global assistance bill, that was nothing more than a ruse to get people to give more money to other countries. And in the end, what did they do? They gave more money to other countries and they gave nothing to the border. They did it so they could later on blame the other side for not passing that bill, but it was not a good bill and it certainly was not a border bill.
If you had written it, what would it have had in it specifically?
Well, first of all, HR 2 is a good bill, but I wouldn't have written it. You know why? Because the president has all the authority he needs right now under Immigration Naturalization 212F to fix this problem, to implement the same things that he undid when President Trump left office, when he took office. He undid, bragging about it, 84 different executive orders that were directly related to the border. He can reinstate those today if he wanted to. And it wouldn't cost us, the taxpayers, more money. We wouldn't have another bill which would codify in the law a lot of bad practices, including allowing 5,000 people to come into the country a day. What is that? What makes that the magical number? If you can stop it at 5,000, you can stop it at 0. And that should be the acceptable number that we as citizens of the United States have for our federal government when we talk about illegal entry into this country. That number should be 0. And so there was a lot of pieces of that needed to be changed. They weren't good. They were going to codify in the law bad practices. And it didn't need to happen because right now we can fix it without a bill and without more money being thrown at the border. You
mentioned NGOs a little bit ago. That's kind of taken on the conversation nationally in the last couple of weeks. Do you see them as being beneficial? Do you find them making the problem worse from your perspective here?
Initially, they probably had some level of benefit. However, I find that most NGOs that are active along the southern border are aiding and abetting in human trafficking. They are financially incentivized to continue to have the problem come to this country. We know for a fact there's NGOs in the Darien Gap that are helping people come to this country. We know that the UN has admitted to giving money to 248 NGOs. We know that globally there are many NGOs that are aiding and abetting in this problem at our southern border. And it's not exclusive to them. It includes NGOs within our own country that are basically giving a soft landing to people that came into this country illegally or that made an asylum claim that will be proven false later down the road.
And you talked another issue that was high on your priority list is the economy. I mean, that's a monster of an issue to fix. Where do you start with something like that?
Energy independence. The majority of the cost increases we've had are because we've lost our energy independence. The cost of oil, the cost of energy has gone up. And when you have an increase in the cost, it's going to increase the cost of the goods that we're consuming. They're not going to absorb that for us. They're going to pass that on to us, the consumers. If we don't pay for it in the higher prices for the products we're consuming, gas, groceries, everything else, they're going to pass it on to us in the way of inflation through the government. So getting our energy independence back would be one of the quickest switches that we could flip in this country to start getting our economy under control. But it is certainly not going well. Talked to a guy who owns a restaurant right at the south end of our county, just outside of it. And he was telling me yesterday that his cost of his goods has gone up 50%. 50%. How does he pass that on to the consumer? He can't raise the prices of his products or nobody will buy it. So now he's going to take less money into his home. And maybe he can't hire as many employees because of the increased costs. There's a ripple effect that it has when we don't have our energy independence. So that would be the first thing that we need to do.
I know that right now that Arizona is not getting its own oil. It's going through other states. Is that something you'd want to start changing as well?
Well, we need to get back to the fracking. We need clean energy. We need the propane. We need all that energy. We need to have the oil. We need more nuclear. We've gone away from nuclear. Nuclear is one of the cleanest, most reliable, productive energy sources. And yet most places are going away from it. We're lucky to have Palo Verde here in this state because it gives us a stable energy source. However, we're moving in the wrong direction as a country. We've got this push for this Green New Deal and all this climate stuff. How crazy to think that you can fix the climate when you can't even fix the southern border. You're going to fix Mother Nature. If you wanted to really care for the climate, look to nuclear energy. It is clean, it is effective, and we can power a lot of homes with that and a lot of businesses.
I want to talk about something that's on the minds of a lot of people here, just because of the recent news, but abortion is on the minds of a lot of people in the state going into this new election cycle, and especially with the ruling from the Supreme Court a couple of weeks ago. Where do you stand on that issue?
Well, I'm pro-life. Always have been. I've been a lifelong conservative. I've never changed. And I don't waver just to get votes from people either. I don't ever change that. I'm pro-life. I think life starts at conception. And I think we should do everything we can to protect the life of the unborn. Ronald Reagan had a great quote. He said, I can't help but notice that everybody who's for abortion has already been born. Who will stand up for the unborn? And a lot of people will say, well, this is about choice. There was a series of choices that typically led up to this situation. Less than 1% of abortions are for rape or incest. What I see with this abortion issue is the left is trying to mask the fact that they're failing in every other category. And they want people to get emotionally charged about an issue that most of us are never going to agree on. You could bring 10 people in this room and we'll have 10 different opinions on what abortion should be or what it should not be. So I don't try to chase that. I tell you who I am and what I believe and where my moral compass is. But what I will ask everybody is, please do not let them get you to be a single issue voter, because there are issues that are affecting not just a portion of Arizonans. They're affecting all Arizonans. And those issues are the border, fentanyl poisonings, the economy, higher gas prices, grocery prices, the rise in crime, national security. The list goes on and on of issues that are affecting all Americans. And so while we may not agree on everything, I would just ask that please do not let the politicians get you locked into being a single issue voter, because there is a lot of issues that we're facing as Americans, and collectively as Americans, we got to face those issues.
So the incoming abortion ban, near total, originally from 1864, I mean, it's been adjusted since then somewhat, but is that something you're in support of?
I think one of the problems with the way they've crafted that is they keep talking about it as an 1864 ban. The law was originally passed in 1864. We were a territory. However, it was reaffirmed in 1901. It was reaffirmed in 1913. It was reaffirmed again in 1928. And then it was reaffirmed again in 1977 by both Republicans and Democrats, 3 or 4 years after Roe v. Wade became a federal law. Obviously, it didn't have the ability to enforce it because of Roe v. Wade. However, I think it's disingenuine to the people to mislead them to say that this is an 1864 law. It was recodified even this year by the courts to say that. I go back to it. I'm not running for the state legislature. I think that the Dobbs decision was appropriate. It does not belong in the federal government. I don't need the federal government to set my moral compass. I don't think anybody wants the federal government setting their moral compass. This was appropriately put back in the state's hands, and the state's going to have to make a decision. And you have legislators right now at the state level that are working towards coming up with something. And then there's also a push to run a ballot measure where the people will vote on it. I will tell you, I hope that people do not vote for that, because it's a terrible bill that goes way too far. It allows for abortion up until the day of birth. It also allows for a human trafficker to take his victims or his people that he traffics in to get an abortion without any repercussions. It allows, let's say, a high school coach or teacher to impregnate a teenage girl and take her into one of those clinics and get an abortion without notifying the parents. And I'm not okay with that as a law enforcement guy, and I don't think any of the citizens of Arizona are. So please look into that bill. It goes too far. The legislature's got their deal to do. I'm not going to get in the way of that because I'm running for the U.S. Senate. So I don't think I think it was appropriately taken out of the federal government's hands, put in the states.
And I just want to clarify, just because I know it's an issue that is important to a swath of Arizona voters, is that, I won't say 1864, but is the near total incoming abortion ban, is that something that those tenets of no exceptions for rape or for incest, that's something you're supportive of?
No, I think everybody understands that we have to deal with those. When society, I've been in this law enforcement career for 20 years. I've seen the worst things. We're the ones that show up to those houses when those things happen. We also need to understand that while people use this as a reason for abortion, it comprises of less than 1%. And those numbers come from the Guttmacher Institute, a pro-choice place. So it's a very small percentage. So I don't want the people to get misled to believing that this is a high percentage of things. It is a very low percentage. And we should do everything, and I have for my entire career, done everything I can to protect life.
I said I don't want to harp on it too long, but that the no exceptions, that is something that personally you are
well, I don't think that the no exceptions is going to last here. It's going to stand here in the state of Arizona. They've already said they're going to repeal the law. It's going to go to the governor. So now the legislature and the state is going to have to come up with what they deem is the best for our state.
I want to pivot a bit and talk a little bit about the race so far for you. You've been in this for a little bit now, got a couple months left. I haven't seen as many ads or ad buys from you, kind of the outreach that we've seen from some of the other people in the race. What's your approach been so far?
Well, my approach is to win.
Well, of course, but yeah, what's been your approach to reach voters?
Look, that takes money. It does. It takes money. We are out there campaign financing. We're fundraising all the time. You need money to go out and do those ads. There's other ways that you can achieve it. In the end, who wins is not who has the most ads on TV or who raises the most money. In the end, what matters is who gets the most amount of votes. And we feel very good about what the work we've done over the last year and a half. And look, we've had to do a lot of hard work, a lot of grinding, a lot of showing up to events and people's houses, but it's worked. And we feel very good about where we're at. And people like our approach. We have been focused on ourselves and our own race and winning this race. Like I tell people, I'm not running against anybody. I'm running for the U.S. Senate. I'm out there convincing people that I am the most qualified candidate for this job. And then they get a chance to vote on that. And I hope that on July 30th, they'll vote for me. But in the end, it's about getting votes. It's not about having TV ads.
So it's not something you're concerned about, taking a different approach, more of a grassroots.
Would I love to have TV ads telling people how great I am? Sure. We're going to have to do it different ways. You might see a few TV ads, but we're accomplishing that goal, and we're doing it cost effectively. We're doing it in a way that really touches the voter as opposed to a far off view of us. We're really trying to get in there with them and show that we're part of the community. I'm a normal guy. I'm just a regular guy that was tired of where the things are in my government. And I felt that I had the right talents and experience to go and represent Arizona on the Senate level, especially when it relates to border, economy, net crime, national security. Those four issues are really wheelhouse issues for us.
I kind of wanted to talk about your decision to go for this race in general. I mean, you got into law enforcement later than most people do. Now you're getting into politics as well. I mean, these are big jumps and big jobs to take on. So why these fields?
Because I'm a patriot. Because I love God, family, freedom, and the Constitution. I didn't like the direction of the country when I decided to run for sheriff. I thought they were undermining the rule of law. And so I made the jump to run for sheriff. I don't believe you should be the guy that just complains. If you want to do, you should do something about it. And that's what I'm doing. And now when I look at the Senate race and I look at the issues on the federal level and I look at the experience that I bring, it's not in my nature to stand on the corner and watch the building burn to the ground. Nor is it in my nature to wait for somebody else to run into the building. I'm going to run in because I love this country. And my wife and I and my family, we're determined to be free. And if that's what it takes to run for Senate and go back to Washington, D.C., then so be it. We'll go back and do it. But we need people that are real Americans doing this. No more lawyers, no more of this politicians. They've been getting it wrong. We need real Americans back in D.C. representing us. More cowboy hats and belt buckles.
You talk about quality education as being a large part of your platform as well. What specifically does that look like? I mean, does that look like more funding, kind of the different focus?
It looks like school choice. It looks like letting parents make the decisions of who they want to educate their children. And I think what that creates is a competitive education environment. And so what we need to give the parents that choice. They know who their children are better than anybody else. I don't think the state should be dictating that. I certainly don't think the federal government is going to be dictating that. I look forward as a senator to getting rid of the Department of Education. It has no value on a federal level. It wasn't intended for the founding fathers, never intended for the federal government to decide how we were going to educate our children. So I look forward to and encouraging kids to more trade schools. things where they can go out and really expand their mind as to what kind of jobs are out there, that while college may be appropriate for some children, it may not be good for everybody. We don't need to push people towards getting college debts, student loan debts, when they could go into the field they want to go in through a trade school.
When I've spoken with teachers in the past, I know that they say that they're, and I'm sure you've heard this too, they're so burnt out. They've got a lot on their plate. What do you do to kind of make it, because obviously if teachers who aren't ready to come in and teach every day, it's going to be very difficult for our students to be learning. So what is the plan to kind of make sure that they're also being taken care of?
Well, once again, this is going to be a state issue. So what I will do is support good candidates within the state. I'm a voter here in the state. I want good legislators and I want good state senators that are going to do the best they can to have a good educational system. But once again, for anybody listening, it's not the federal government's job to dictate how education goes on a state level. And what I can tell the people is that when I become a senator, I'm going to pull the chain back on the federal government. Keep them out of our decisions, what we do here in the state, especially as it relates to education.
You talk about backing the blue. Obviously, that's important to you personally and professionally. What does that look like on a federal level?
Well, what it looks like on a federal level is we got to get our federal agencies under control. We got to give more power back to the local, state agencies. It's states' rights. It's back to the 10th Amendment. And the federal government is supposed to be a helping agency. We've got the FBI, we got ATF, we got all these different agencies now that have become so big. And the relationships, while we have really good working relationships here in Arizona, it's been fractured a lot of places across the country. I think we've really got to dig in and cut into just what we need from the federal government. I think we can cut into a lot and probably have a lot of budget savings there as well.
I wanted to end on a personal note for you. I know fentanyl misuse is something that you personally, professionally had to deal with, but also with your son as well. Where do we even begin to solve that problem? I know it's something that so many parents are worried about in the country.
Just this morning, I had a traffic stop. I pulled a car over, expired tags. They had two people that ended up being illegal in the back. The two American citizens, driver and a passenger. The passenger in the front seat had fentanyl pills on her possession. And you could tell she admitted, she says, I got a problem. And what this society has done is the open border has made fentanyl really easy to get. So we're not helping those folks that are struggling with addiction. We dealt with it within our own family, so you're not immune to it. Even the sheriff had one of my sons. Fortunately, my son was able to go cold turkey. And by the time my son died in a DUI accident where somebody who was under the influence of drugs and alcohol hit him, and my granddaughter and my daughter-in-law, he had been clean for going on 2 years at that point. We were pretty proud of the change that he and his fiance made, but it just goes to show you that not everybody's that lucky. A lot of the people we deal with at our jail are people that have made poor decisions, while under the influence of drugs and alcohol. 85%, I think, is the statistic. 85% of the people that are in our jails and in our facilities are there for drugs and alcohol. We can do better as Americans. We need programs, but it doesn't do any good to mop the bathroom floor until you turn off the tub water. And the tub water is at the southern border. That's where those drugs are coming in through. And we need to stop that flow of drugs as much as we can so that we can then start to treat the addiction problems that we have in this country. The direction we're going now, we're not going to fix it. And you're going to have more families like mine, more families like other people who actually lose their loved ones to fentanyl poisoning. And you know who's never around when that happens? The federal government. They're not there. They're the ones who let it in, yet they're not there to clean up the mess. We're the ones that have to explain to families why their loved one is now dead in their home or how they died from a fentanyl poisoning. And that's tough. It's a heavy load for us to carry. Not to mention the daily Narcan doses we give to people that are having a fentanyl poisoning. So yeah, I take this very serious, and I'm doing what I can to fight against this fentanyl, and I'll do everything I can. I've promised one family after another, I will fight as hard as anybody to stop the fentanyl flow into this country.
While we're here, and my last question for you is, while Arizonans are listening to you right now, what do you have to tell them?
Please come vote for me on July 30th. If you want a candidate who is a real person, authentic, who has a you know where my compass points, whether you agree with it or not. You know that my compass points in a certain direction, but I'm here to represent everybody. Republicans, Democrats, Independents, just like I've done as a sheriff. So if you love God, family, freedom, and the Constitution, you love this country, you're going to want to elect me, because I'll go back to Washington, D.C. and represent. And I'm not afraid. I've got the courage to do it. I've shown the people over the last 8 years. I stood against the lockdowns. I stood against the mask mandates. I stood against the vaccine mandates. We need elected officials with the right experience and the right courage to go back to and defend us at the DC level and federal government level. And July 30th is people's opportunity to vote for me in the primary, even the independents. You can come out, request a Republican ballot. You can vote on election day, and then I would love to have your vote again in November. So that's my message to all of you. Vote on July 30th. No matter who you vote for, please get out and vote.
And final question, should things not go your way on July 30th, are you willing to accept the results of the election?
Yeah, look, I've never been that guy. I've always been the guy who believes that, you put up a good fight, and we're going to do everything we can, at least here in our county, to make sure that we're going to protect our elections. We've worked hard in Pinal County. We put cameras up on all of our boxes last time. We were monitoring the feeds. We opened it up for the public to come in and watch the feeds. So we did a lot for election integrity, and we got a lot of work still to do. There's a lot of Arizonans across this country who are uncomfortable about how our election's being run. We're working hard in Pinal County to do it. That's where my control is right now. I hope to be the winner. I hope to not have to be the loser, but I get that anytime you're in a competition, there's a winner and a loser. I'm old enough to know that. It's not trophies for everybody.
That's
now,
right.
I'm not a trophy for everybody guy either. I want to win this election based on the merits. I want to win it with honor or lose it with honor. And that's what we've done. That's how we run our campaign. We've been focused on the issues, focused on the experience that I bring to the table. And we've been very pleased with the reception we've received. We feel really good about July 30th. And we really feel good about November. We're going to win that race.
Thank you so much, Sheriff.
Thank you.